everyone. How's everyone doing? First of all, thank you so much for the intro. I'm actually not the founder. Apologies. I'm the global managing director at Badi. And today, I'm hoping to talk to you guys about how we leverage AI in building a marketplace. So the first thing you might ask is, why have I chosen the topic? Particularly given that I'm the global managing director and not the chief data officer, right? We have super smart people in our HQ team with PhDs in machine learning. But the reason why I've chosen this topic is because we're a very specific type of startup, right? We have an amazing array of speakers today at this marketplace conference who are speaking about a number of different challenges that we have in building a marketplace. A lot of those challenges are focused on the supply side or the demand side, or how we grow a marketplace, right? How do we expand into new markets? How do we hire people? A lot of these problems are focused on operations. Hiring new talent, invest in marketing. At Badi, however, we obviously have a lot of those challenges, but at the same time, we also, at the core of our platform is data. So I'll tell you a lot more about that. But today, in a kind of a high-level view, in non-technical terms, I'd like to share our learnings from Badi, how we leverage AI to build our marketplace. Sorry, here's that clicker. So I'm going to start off with a quote. The best investment on earth is earth. So that basically leads us into setting the playing field in terms of who we are as Badi and which industry are we in. So the real estate industry, right? This is one of the largest industries in the world, with an estimated, valuation of over $200 trillion. This is not small beans that we're talking about. However, as many of you guys know, it's still a very, very old school industry. It's extremely antiquated. It's a very painful process to look for a new apartment, whether that's buying or renting. And it's extremely fragmented. So there's a lot of different players that have tackled the real estate industry from a number of different platforms. But what that results in is that the entire consumer experience is very fragmented and very complicated. And thus far, there have been a number of PropTech companies who have tried to tackle this problem. But it's still pretty much in its infancy, right? So there's a huge opportunity here. We're talking about $200 trillion industry. But this, we're still at the very starting gate in terms of PropTech. And also, we have a huge challenge. It's a very, very supply-constrained market, right? I mean, majority of marketplaces, supply is everything. When you talk to anyone from Uber, from Airbnb, from Deliveroo, where I actually used to work, we always focus on supply. But the real estate industry, it's even more, right? So currently, in terms of the global population, 54% of the world's population lives in cities. I mean, raise your hand if you currently are, in the past or in the future, have lived in a large city, right? Like almost everyone, I would imagine. So half the world's population lives in cities, but by 2050, that number is going to increase to 66%. And according to future projections by the UN, we're talking about 6.3 billion people are going to live in a city. I mean, is that a little bit scary? I mean, I'm a little bit nervous about that. And the thing is, very simply, there are not enough homes for people living in these cities. And the number of housing units there are extremely expensive, and there's just not enough space, right? So what this is going to lead towards in the future is there's going to be a trend towards people choosing to live in smaller units and choosing to live in rooms, rather than having the whole apartment, one room at a time, renting a room. And as we all know, choosing a place to live and who to live with is the most critical, personal, intimate, expensive, complicated, decision you can make, right? When you think about the previous cities that you've lived in or your current city, one of the first memories you'll think about is, your home, right? That's where you live. That's almost the first question that people ask you when they meet you. What do you do and where do you live, right? So obviously this is a super crucial decision, and we take this very seriously. So I'd like to introduce you to Badi, our company. So we are the leading app when it comes to finding the perfect flatmate, according to age, lifestyle, interests, personalities. And we simplify urban living by matching rooms, tenants, and landlords. And our core mission is to make city living accessible for everyone, everywhere. So we're targeting those 6.3 billion people, living in cities, who all experience this challenge. So Badi was founded in 2015. Our team is based in Spain, so we're a Barcelona-based company. We've been there for 3 years, and in those 3 years, we've established ourselves as the market leader in the room rental platform. And we've just recently expanded into a number of new markets, which I manage. So how does Badi work? There's a few simple steps here. So the first thing is that, as a seeker, someone who's looking for a new flat, you go in on our platform and you look for rooms, right? Very simple. And as you can see, we really, really focus on having as simple of a design as possible. We really want to generate a really great user experience. So we know that there's a lot of wonderful classifieds platforms out there at the moment, but we really focus on minimizing the number of clicks you need to go from point A, which is looking for the flat, to point B, which is finding the flat, and being really happy with your decision. We then have a search functionality. So you can look for people who seem to have a similar type of personality or lifestyle or the different kind of criteria that you're looking for when you're looking for a room. And this can be a number of different things. It can be age, it can be their job, it can be whether they like certain type of music, whether they have certain type of sports or things like that. Then when both sides of the parties, match, they essentially both accept each other's requests, you have a match, right? According to your interests and social connections. And then we also have a chat platform. So we know that, as I mentioned before, this is a very important decision. There's a lot of crucial factors in there that are going to determine whether you get along, whether it's going to be a good, good roommate marriage. So our chat functionality essentially allows you to freely chat through all of those kind of difficult details. Whether you have a dog, whether someone's allergic, whether who's going to do the cooking and cleaning. There's a lot of kind of decisions to be made. And then I want to talk about our booking feature, right? So as I mentioned, there's currently in the real estate industry, there's a lot of players tackling different problems, and a lot of the incumbent real estate platforms to find a roommate or a room out there kind of have a segregated kind of approach. So they may help you to look for a room, but they don't actually help you to book it, right? So for us, we want to make sure that it's as simple as possible. And at the heart of everything, trust is the core of our platform. So we have a secure payment platform, the booking feature, which allows you to directly transact through our platform. So what's really interesting about this is how people use this feature, right? So for us, actually, 70%, roughly 70 to 80% of the users on our platform are actually locals. So we have a different target market than, for example, someone like Airbnb, because Airbnb is primarily for vacation, short-term vacation rentals. These are tourists, people coming from outside the city, moving into the city. For us, however, we actually see majority of our users are locals. However, those core 20 to 30%, which are the remainder, are coming out from outside the city. So whether that's London, people moving from Manchester or Edinburgh, outside of London, but in the UK, or globally, right, coming from different cities in Europe or New York, et cetera. So what this feature allows them to do, given what we just talked about in terms of the huge discrepancy between supply and demand, is it allows them to reserve their room in advance. Right, this is a competitive market we're talking about. I mean, I previously had lived in New York, and there were literally there were interviews that I had to do to move in with someone, right? Like there were 30 people gathered in a room where they had 10-minute slots to meet with everyone to be able to secure your room and determine that you are the perfect roommate because of all of their criteria. It's a super intense world out there. So we give you a heads up, we give you a leg up by allowing you to book your room in advance. And obviously from the seeker point of view, that's really helpful because, you can say, hey, I want this room, I'm there. And from the supply side, from the lister point of view, it's cash up front. So obviously there's liquidity, you have security in terms of, of making sure that person's gonna pay. And I've touched on a lot of these things, but essentially, in summary, our platform solves the room rental challenge because of these things, right? You can browse profiles based on a number of criteria that's very specific to each person. You can connect and interact directly, so there's no intermediaries on our platform. Forget about those hundreds of emails or phone calls you have to make in order to look for that room. You can chat directly with the person you're going to be living with. There's a selection process. You can accept or decline candidates very easily. And our brand overall is targeted towards young professionals and students, so something between 18 to 40, roughly. And what's interesting is that a lot of people think that we're a student platform, and actually our target segment is more towards late 20s, late 20s, early 30s. It depends on the market. Some markets like Rome have a slightly older clientele, but our lister side, our supply side tends to be a bit older than our demand side, because if you imagine the people who are a bit more settled in the cities that they live tend to be a bit older, a bit more mature. They might own a flat, things like that. And then this is the piece I'm going to spend majority of my time talking about, is the data piece. So this is the core differentiation of Badi, right? So we leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning to really allow you to connect with your flatmate in as efficient and effective way as possible. One last thing before we kind of dive into that is the fact that we focus, our core platform is focused on renting rooms rather than entire apartments. Why is that? So I've already mentioned that, as the population of the world moves towards cities, we're going to focus much more on renting per room, just purely based on space and cost. And it's a far more profitable to rent by rooms if you're the supply side. So landlords and professionals can receive more revenue. Tenants are able to reduce their rent by sharing. And we're able to really optimize the space that we have in each in the city by renting by room and decreasing vacancies. And very sneakily, there's one other benefit to renting by rooms from an AI perspective. We're able to personalize our algorithms in a much more efficient way if we're personalizing it for one person and for one room rather than for multiple people in one room. So just really quickly going through this, just talking about our growth since we've started. Since January, for example, we've grown our supply hugely. In terms of new listings, we've actually increased our supply, our global supply by tenfold since January. From a demand side, back in August 2016, it took 5 minutes for us to receive a rental request. Now, fast forward 2 years, in the few seconds that I've just spent on the slide, we've already had several rental requests, right? And hopefully, by this time next year, it'll be even faster and even faster. So we do receive, we've seen a lot of growth in terms of demand. And we've also surpassed our 1 million users just a couple weeks ago. So that's quite exciting. In terms of matches, we also have seen significant growth in matches, and specifically our machine learning algorithms have helped us to increase matches by 10%. And this is getting more sophisticated, more accurate over time. And then just really quick, in terms of our platform, what's really interesting is that because we're a peer-to-peer marketplace, essentially anyone, anywhere can put their room on Badi, and anyone can find a match. So we actually are present in 120 different countries in terms of rental requests, even though we've spent €0 in marketing, in those cities. So that's quite interesting. And that was in terms of rental requests. This is in terms of actual presence. So this could be signups. It could be any type of activity in the platform. We currently see activity in 154 countries and over 3,000 cities. And this is just in the past 3 years that we've been alive as a platform. So it's quite interesting. And then finally, in terms of, our journey in the past couple years, we have established ourselves as the market leader in the first 2 years that we've been in Spain. And therefore, we've started expanding. So I'm actually currently based in London, but majority of our team is in Barcelona headquarters. And we've launched into London, Paris, and Rome in the last few months or so. And we'll continue to grow and expand as we see success. So now, the reason that we're all here, we're going to talk about AI. So first of all, I want you guys to think about back to that first day that you had to look for an apartment, your first apartment in a big city. What was that experience like, right? It was complicated. There's a lot of different factors you have to consider, from your budget, obviously, to availability, to neighborhood, to who is the person you're going to be living with? Is it someone similar to you? Is it someone you want to live with? Someone that's quite different, someone who minds their own business, or someone who has wine with you every night. There's a lot of different factors that feature into that decision. So these are a small sample of things to consider, when you're flat searching. Whether you want a double bed, right? Whether you have a certain age range that you're targeting. Whether this flat has a lift. Whether this person goes to your university, or whether it's a friend of a friend. Obviously, you want the person to pay their rent on time. Whether the person's easygoing. Whether the flat is near a metro line. There's so many different things that we all consider when we're trying to find this perfect person. And how do we make this decision, right? There's so many things. It takes so long, and you have to basically do the filtering yourself. So we at Badi, we recognize that challenge, and we have we want to solve this problem for all of those 6.3 billion future users that we have out there. So we want to solve this, evergreen challenge that every single person speaking today and almost every person attending this conference understands of balancing supply and demand. And for us, supply and demand mean our lister side, our supply, which typically is our landlords, or our seeker side, or our tenants. And obviously, as we know, the seeker side is typically much larger in volume than our lister side. And we leverage artificial intelligence to help us to balance the marketplace by matching the right demand to the right supply. And that's the core of kind of what we're going to talk about today. So let's kind of go back to basics. What is artificial intelligence? You hear this word thrown around, in every tech magazine these days. Every startup wants to associate themselves with artificial intelligence. What does this actually mean? So this is a term that we use, which is essentially machines that are programmed to think like human beings. So the way that humans reason, the way that humans, think through complex problems and really, figure out the crux of the issue, this is essentially what AI is meant to do. And what is machine learning? So machine learning is a field within AI that's basically saying, okay, now that we've programmed the computer, how can the program continue to run without human interference? So without us sitting there, telling a computer what to do, how can the computer actually take that information and suggest new information without us telling it to? So I'm going to introduce our recommendation system. So this is basically our system which recommends tenants and rooms using previous historical data that we have about you and previous matches that we have on the platform. So our algorithms learn on a daily basis 10,000 successful connections per day, right? The value of most marketplaces is their data. For us, we're able to leverage all of these data points, which are super valuable for us, and allows us to make smarter decisions, build smarter algorithms to tell you, to help you find the perfect match in a better way. And obviously, given the fact that we can program our algorithms to learn over time, it gets smarter and better. So quick case study here. So I want to talk about our lister recommendation engine. So this is kind of the core of one of the key pieces that we've built using AI. So currently without AI, right, we have the tenant side and with the landlord side. And how do they find each other? As I mentioned previously, we have a matching platform, and they essentially send requests to each other to ask each other whether they want to live together. So these are organic requests. But what happens when there's a discrepancy between supply and demand? I mean, we've already talked about this. There's a huge challenge here in which landlords are in a very luxurious position because they're sitting there with their flat in central Berlin or wherever, and they have all these people interested in living with them. Right, so you have organic requests from tenant A, for tenant B, from tenant C, all the way down to all of those 30 or 50 people who might be contacting you. So how does a landlord make a decision, and how do we make sure that the right tenants are matched with the right landlords? With the help of our lister recommendation engine. So basically what this is that we have built a recommendation engine using artificial intelligence, which essentially will recommend to the landlord the number of tenants who most match the landlord. And this is not necessarily the tenants who are most similar to the landlord. We actually have quite a few interesting instances where there's someone older living with someone younger, or people who have different jobs, coming from different countries. So it's not necessarily people who are similar, but it's people who have the maximum probability of matching with you, right? And then after we've kind of churned out our algorithm, these are the tenants who are most likely to match with the landlord. The landlord will get this recommendation, offered to them in the platform. They will then take a look and say, hey, does this person match, actually, is this a good candidate? If they accept the request, then the tenant will be also notified, and the tenant will be able to accept or decline the request. And when the tenant accepts, that's a successful match. So we basically, using our recommendation engine, we kind of cheat the system a bit, and we give the landlord, served on a platter, these are the people who are most likely to be able to live with you in a compatible scenario. So, and the way that we do that is through our data. As I mentioned before, one of the core valuable pieces of Badi, of our company's core value propositions, is the fact that we have thousands and millions of of data points that we gather every single time someone signs up to our platform. Because when you sign up, you fill out a profile about yourself with all of those criteria we've talked about before, which takes 2-3 minutes, and we harness all of that data. And our machine, we basically take all of that data, we then build a model, which tells us, these are the likely scenarios of how a match can happen based on these based on the data. And then we train the model. We say, okay, this is additional data point, this is additional data points. Every single day, there's additional data points. And we train the model to get smarter and smarter over time. And then we make predictions with the model. Right? That's where the key piece in machine learning happens. When we train the model to say that, okay, we have all of this information, this is the new information that's coming in every day, now you can think on your own. And what's really interesting is that we don't just take the positive data. We don't just take the previous historical information that we have in which the tenants and the landlords match, or both accept the request. We also learn a lot when people reject a request, right? When people reject a request, then we say, okay, then maybe something didn't go right, and then the data goes back and then continues to learn. So, and what's really core kind of at this of this whole thing is that recommendation requests are much more valuable that we found than organic requests because they really optimize the probability of a match. So we have a shortcut, essentially. We've created a shortcut in understanding, how do we match two people by taking all of this information that we have in the past and learning from it. I mean, think about, for example, a lot of you guys may have shopped at Amazon, right? Amazon has a recommendation engine, a very powerful one that says, users who are similar to you have bought this, right? Or frequently bought together this. And that's kind of one of the most powerful elements of Amazon. And that's one of the core reasons why they become so powerful and so, such a huge, global phenomenon. Because they're able to harness all of that big data and get smarter over time. And once you get to a certain point, you can then really understand at a very personalized level, okay, this kind of person with this kind of background, with this, these locations, with this age, is most likely going to be, purchase this. And this is the same thing, same kind of rationale that we use at Badi. Once we start, learning about people, we'll continue to feed the machine to get smarter and smarter. So what are the results from all of that? So since we have introduced our machine learning kind of algorithms, we have over 15 million recommendations globally with a match rate of 32%. So what does this match rate mean? So out of all of the recommendations that we've given people, 32% of the time has resulted in a match. So 32% of the time, both sides have said, yes, you're right, actually, we are a good fit. So to me, that's quite high, and obviously, we're continuing to increase and improve that. The direct benefits are the fact that, obviously, we have more requests and a higher match rate, but very importantly, we've improved match quality. And so when you improve match quality, that means that people, have more trust in your platform to deliver what they're looking for you to deliver, which is finding the perfect roommate. In addition, we've had a positive correlation with bookings, so we've seen increased bookings. And the indirect benefits, although these are a bit more difficult to measure, are the fact that we have more active users, daily, weekly, monthly, and higher retention rate because people trust you more, right? People see you as the go-to platform when they're looking for a roommate. So that, the lister recommendation engine was kind of the first example I want to give in terms of how we leverage AI. There's a few other examples I want to talk about. The first one is social connections. So when you look for a flat, generally, what's the first channel you go to? Friends and family, right? A lot of people just have their email listservs and they just send out an email to all the people they know and say, hey, does someone have a room? Can I stay here? We recognize that. We recognize that trust is super important in making this decision. And no matter how many degrees of separation, whether it's a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, that you have that first friend to connect with, right? You have that one person who like, okay, they're kind of reliable. They might have some weird friends, but they're okay. So we really understand that, and so therefore we want to make that even easier. So we basically have built this social connections feature in our platform, which allows us to connect. You can see how many friends in common you have, or how many degrees of separation you are from the people who you're going to match with. So I think this really, really helps in terms of the trust factor. In addition, we want to make sure that the seeker side has a great experience. So we've already mentioned before that the lister side, the supply side, is in a very luxurious position, right? They have all these great people coming to them. They have all these requests. They don't really have to worry too much, right? They have a pretty good experience. But the seeker side, we want to make sure the seeker side also has a great experience, because if they don't, then they're not going to come back. So we want to make sure our supply is very clean and up to date. So we've built this algorithm called Roxanna, which allows us to keep our stock clean, updated, and unpublishes passive listings. So if you are a lister and you haven't accepted to chat, or you haven't actually made any kind of activity in the platform for a certain number of days, then unfortunately, we're going to unpublish you. Obviously, we're going to remind you, multiple times. Hey, we've noticed you haven't done anything. There's all these great people wanting to chat with you, but we want to make sure that we have a kind of a strict stance on this to make sure there's a good experience for everyone on the platform. So based on Roxanna, seekers can only see active listings. So this algorithm, Roxanna basically goes in and they can tell, which people have not been very active on the platform. And based on this, our response rate currently is 92%. So 92% of all of our the people on the platform will respond when you ask them to match with you. To give you an idea of what this number used to be, it was 60%. So this number was 60% before we introduced Roxanna, and now it's improved hugely. And then I want to talk about another way that we use AI, and this is based on quality. At the heart of everything, if we don't focus on quality, then our platform is nothing. Basically, no one will come back. We're not going to build user trust. We're not going to build retention, and we will have failed our mission. So we really strongly value quality, and the two things I want to talk about are content moderation and fraud moderation. So the first thing is content moderation. So when you are a lister and you have listed, on your flat on our platform, you fill out all of these things on your profile, but people are sometimes a little bit sneaky or a little bit lazy, right? They don't always put the right things. They don't always, they're not always complete. They're not always, as thorough as we would like them to be, right? And so there's a number of things that they might put, and photos, we find, are a super important part of their listing. Everyone looks at photos. It's one of the most important things when you're looking for a flat. So, for example, when there's a swimming pool, if someone has, put as one of the features on their flat, is that they have a swimming pool, that's fantastic, right? Especially in somewhere like central London, which is where I live, where no one I know owns a swimming pool, right? This is like a top luxury, premium product. But if you have a swimming pool, for example, and you have not included it on your listing, then you're not really optimizing, you're not really selling yourself in the best way. So we have built algorithms which can actually detect, when there's certain features in someone's flat, whether it's a swimming pool, whether that's a balcony, whether that's an ensuite bathroom, there's certain things that we can detect using our algorithms that say, hey, you have this great, attribute, you have this great feature in your flat. Let's make sure we mention it. And obviously, as we continue to expand into different markets, there'll be different kind of different features that are interesting and are valuable in different cities as well. So we'll continue to add to that and learn from that. In addition, on the empty room, for example, if your room says that it's furnished, and then you have this photo, that's just confusing. People don't really, they may not trust, that you actually have a furnished flat. So we are able to also recognize things like this and making sure that the listings are exactly as they say they are, right? And then also this people element. So I've already talked about earlier that for us, renting by room is very valuable, both benefiting the tenant as well as the lister. But also, from a data point of view, it allows us to be able to personalize to each person and to each room, who should they live with and what kind of room would suit them. So when you have multiple people in an image like this, it makes it very confusing, and it honestly kind of confuses the data, right? Because you have like two people with a lot of different characteristics. And so we, strongly recommend to everyone to have, one profile with one person, one picture. So we can also find, who are the listers or seekers out there with multiple people in their photo, and, gently remind them to maybe, change it. In addition, fraud. We take fraud very seriously. As I mentioned, what we offer as a company is to allow you to find a safe place. We want you to find the home that you're going to belong in and that you're going to enjoy, and it's going to be a huge, super important experience in your living in the city. So fraud just kind of ruins this whole thing, right? So we really, we take fraud very seriously. We really want to decrease the amount of fraud on our platform. So this is one element that we have developed, which is which is something called natural language processing, NLP, which is essentially we can start detecting fraud through previous fraudulent activities. So, for example, someone posts a fake listing on our platform, and has a certain number of chats with a certain number of users, and then we find out they're fraudulent. Well, guess what? I mean, it's a horrible experience, so we feel horrible about this, but actually it gives us an opportunity to learn from this and make sure it doesn't happen again. So we then look back, in retrospect, and we say, okay, this person had these number of activity on the platform, which led to this negative outcome. So we now know that these types of chats, in terms of these kind of messages they send, are certain, obviously phone numbers or emails, but also like the types of phrasing they mention, or for example, also the type of photos they might have, the type of description they might have for their listing. All of these elements are key things for our machine to learn that these people have a high degree of tendency to be fraudulent. And so therefore, we can take that and learn from it and detect them immediately. So right now, we've done a lot of work to decrease fraud. And currently, if you're a scammer on our platform, your lifespan is not very long. I'll just say that. So yes.
Is it an issue also that people use the chat to make a booking outside of Badi to avoid commission costs and things like that?
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah. So people are super smart about this. I mean, there's some really smart guys out there who try to convince users to go outside of the platform. They'll say, oh, something's broken. Sorry, I can't get this platform to work. So can you please meet me at this shady place, or can you please transfer money outside?
And did you try to apply machine learning for that as well to detect if telephone numbers are exchanged or?
Yeah. Yeah, so telephone numbers or emails are already like flagged immediately, and they're actually blocked if you type in everything. People get really smart and they'll like put spaces and things, which make it a little bit confusing. But this is kind of like step one in us doing that. And what's really interesting, how many of you guys, when you sign into an email or you try to open a website, they'll ask you to do this really annoying thing where there's like 9 squares and you have to pick which ones have like the parking sign or like something really random. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? So the reason why Google or whichever company uses this is because it's actually really hard for people to for AI to detect what is a parking sign, what is a storefront, what is a whatever stop sign. That's actually a very challenging thing for machine learning to do. And that's why they rely on humans. That's one core differentiator that stands between humans and machines. Like machines find it very hard to detect those kind of pictures. But in fact, that exact same thing is what we're implementing here. So that's what we're building, right? We have built machines to be able to recognize differences in pictures. So that is going to be, a super powerful thing in the future. Oh, okay, sorry. I'll be really quick. So anyway, to summarize, AI helps us in 3 ways. First, it engenders trust. We've talked about that quite a lot. It helps users save time when they're looking for a room, and it improves accuracy. So why does it engender trust? Again, it offers users the most relevant recommendations to them. It helps us to prioritize people they know through social connections, because always someone that you know is always the best in terms of trust. And we focus on quality through Roxanna, which is our monitoring of active listings, content moderation, and fraud prevention. And helps people save time, right? So instead of calling those hundreds of people, users can now cut through the noise. They can find their flatmates quicker through personalized recommendations. In general, our first match, if you go on Badi today, you will very likely have a match within 24 hours. So, this is kind of in general. Obviously, this will also improve over time. And the average time to rental has decreased by 75% in the past 12 months. And it improves accuracy. So algorithms help us to minimize the frictions in the market. Our match rate is now 32%, which is significant. And our algorithm improves over time thanks to the many, many thousands and millions of data points that we gather every day. And that's it. Thank you very much. So we probably have a few minutes. Or no? Okay, sure, go ahead.
Right, so maybe you didn't understand it or wasn't listening. First of all, thanks for the insights, but I was wondering, one of the main issues that real estate platforms have is that there are, I don't know, like 10 people seeking and one person having an apartment actually. And so there are these intermediaries that handle the hassle of communicating. You say you killed that in-between step and there's direct communication. So how do you manage that either the person that has an apartment doesn't have to communicate with 10 people, which is a nightmare, or 8 people try to communicate and they don't get an answer, which is also a nightmare for you as an app provider. So how do you handle that?
No, it's a good question. So in general, we think that at the moment, right, the core target segment for us, both from the seeker and the lister side, are people, are individuals. So they're not like professionals, right? So people, we know that people want to live with people. So through our chat functionality, we try to give them much more personalized ways to be able to connect. So yes, it takes time. But for example, something that we have been considering is for people who think that this process takes a lot of time, we can also help you filter, through those people. So you can have fewer and fewer number of people to consider. With our AI algorithms in the future, we don't want you as a lister to have like 100 recommendations. That's not the end goal, right? We actually, at the end of the day, would love if we could deliver you one person who's perfect for you. So we really want to kind of minimize the noise around that whole thing. Does that answer your question?
Somehow, but still there are like 10 people seeking one person that has an apartment. So if you just show them one match, what about the other 9 people? Don't they get a match at all?
So it is tricky in the marketplace, right? Because there is that supply and demand issue. But we would tend to prioritize for those other 9 people other apartments who we think has a higher likelihood of a match for them, rather than an apartment which is potentially a little bit out of their range. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah, good question. So at the moment, we're still kind of in the early stage. We're a Series A company. We are focused on growth at the moment, so we are not currently monetizing. We have plans to start monetizing in a few months or so.
Because you said you don't allow the communication outside of the platform, so you cut out the emails and phone numbers. So you actually cut on the data on the communication experience. And I was wondering whether you're planning on the transactional piece or not.
Yeah. So in the future, we are thinking about in terms of the marketplace model, taking a percentage at the booking transaction as well as post-booking services.
When you target all people person letting, don't you think that's like about 90% of the room sharing is the black market, so people would be hesitating to process transactions online?
I think it depends on how we do it, right? Because if we offer enough information up front, for example, in the future, if you think about like video conferencing or something that can provide you almost similar experience as meeting someone in person, we can potentially solve a lot of those issues. Obviously, we still have some people who wish to meet people in person, so we want to make sure that we cater for that. So how can we create, for example, a calendar, or some other kind of feature that we allow people to very easily, ask those questions in person or over the phone? Yeah, really good question. Thank you guys very much.
Thank
Really
you
lovely
so
meeting.
much, Carol.